So here's one of the most amazing stories I think I've ever come across. And if it's true, it's even better. I saw this printed and I'm pretty confident it's true. So this story took place in the late 1970s, early 1980s, in an area of Brooklyn which had kind of fallen to disrepair. At some point, there'd been a beautiful Jewish community there, but the people moved out. But there was a synagogue that was just standing there, still owned by the original founders, and basically not being used. It was vacant, and the pews were broken, and it needed to be paint was peeling. The Siddurim, the prayer books, were just ruined. And there was a young couple, a young rabbi with a lot of enthusiasm and spunk and vision, who decided that he'd like to try to revigorate or rejuvenate this old synagogue and make it a little bit more, usable, and see if the people in the neighborhood, because there still were Jews there, would somehow participate. And he got some people to help him, fix the pews and paint it, and he was really excited. And he decided he put signs up around the whole neighborhood, trying to invite people to what would be the inaugural or re-inauguration of the synagogue on Purim evening. And he was going to have a Megillah reading and a masquerade and some food. And the hope was that people would come, they would show up, and they'd have a good time, and they'd want to come back. And everything was on schedule. A week before Purim, the synagogue was looking great, and the rabbi was so excited, as was his wife. And then just a few days before the holiday of Purim, a terrible blizzard hit New York City. And the weight of the snow on the roof caused a piece of the roof to cave in, which eventually caused a huge section of, 3 by 10 feet in the front of the synagogue, literally right behind where the rabbi sat, to collapse. And the rabbi was devastated. After the snowstorm abated a bit, he went in there. He saw the roof had partially broken. He knew probably he can get someone to fix the roof, but it was this huge section, a chunk of the wall right where the rabbi sits, that was totally broken, and it looked terrible. He couldn't introduce people to this synagogue with the hope that they'd want to be part of it. If it looked so terrible, he didn't know what to do, and he figured, you know what, I just have to cancel. I have to postpone our grand reopening. Rabbi walked out, despondent and depressed, and he walked by a little shop, and it looked like a pawn shop, and something pulled him to go in there. And he walks in there and he sees a beautiful embroidered tablecloth. And something pulls him about the tablecloth, and he opens it up, and there's actually a Star of David in the middle with a beautiful edge on it that's embroidered, stunning, gorgeous. And he asked the proprietor, how much does this cost? And they said, it's not a lot, 10, 15 bucks. I mean, we got this from somebody, but most people won't buy it. It's a religious type of thing. And he looks at the measurements, and it's perfect to put up as a tapestry to cover up that big, huge, ugly patch of bare wall right behind his seat. He pays for it, and he heads back with purpose to his synagogue. Maybe after all, it would be ready just in time for Purim. And as he's walking right near his synagogue, he sees a middle-aged woman, running towards the bus stop right in front of the synagogue. And as she gets to the bus stop, the bus pulls away and she misses her bus. And he feels so bad for her, and he walks over to her and he says to her, it's cold outside. When's the next bus? And she says, 45 minutes. He goes, why don't you come into the synagogue? You could relax on one of the pews, and in 40 minutes or so, you'll come back out. And she gratefully says, sure, no problem. She sits and does her thing, and he goes and gets some hammer and some nails, and he starts hanging up the tapestry. And he looks up at the woman after he starts hanging it up, and she's blanching. She's white. She's shocked. And he goes over to her and he says to her, are you okay? And she says, that tablecloth, where'd you get it? He says, I just bought it at a pawn shop. She goes, could you check if in the corner the initials GED are embroidered into them? And he goes and he sees it is. And he says, well, how did you know that? She goes, I'm a survivor, and I escaped World War II by the skin of my teeth. We were a wealthy family in Poland before the war, and I actually had this tablecloth embroidered on behalf of me and for my husband. And when the Nazis came, my husband tried to escape, but he was eventually sent to the camp and never saw him after that point, and I survived. But I don't know how this tablecloth got here. Maybe a survivor brought it over, but it's actually my tablecloth. And the rabbi said, well, please have it. She goes, no, I'd much rather it hang in a synagogue. I don't have a table of that size, and I have no one to put around the table. Well, the rabbi says, well, thank you so much. If you're gifting it to the synagogue, I got to do something back for you. Can I drive you home? And she said, okay. And in the conversation on the way home, he realizes that she cleaned homes for a living to try to make ends meet. She was living in a little apartment in Staten Island, and he drives her to the apartment in Staten Island, thanks her, wishes her good luck. A few nights later, the holiday of Purim comes, and the synagogue is well attended. There's young people and middle-aged people and old people, some in costumes, some not. And the Megillah reading is great, and they make noise by Haman's name, and there's some fun afterwards and some games, and everyone has an awesome time. And then it's time for everyone to leave, and the rabbi and his wife stand at the entrance of the synagogue, wishing everyone the best and welcoming them back, hopefully in the future, for another event. And everyone leaves besides one gentleman, a middle-aged gentleman. And he's sitting there in front of the synagogue, just staring ahead. And the rabbi walks over to him and says to him, "Sir, can I help you?" And he says, that tapestry, that tablecloth, where'd you get that from? And he's like, "Well, it's kind of a long story." And he says, "Why?" He says, the guy says to him, "Could you check if there's initials embroidered into the corner?" And he does. And the man says, "Oh my gosh, this was our tablecloth before the war. It was me and my wife, and unfortunately after the war we never found one another. I don't think she survived." And the rabbi at this point is blanching, and he's in shock, and he says to the guy, "Come with me." He gets him into his car. He drives him to Staten Island. He bangs on the door. The woman opens. She takes a look at the man. He takes a look at her, and they fall into each other's arms. And the rabbi smiles, knowing that Purim, it wasn't just about the Purim miracle thousands of years earlier, but about a very current Purim miracle. And my friends, this true story is not a crazy story, although it sounds that way, because the Almighty often gives us signs. The Almighty often gives us little hints that He's involved. And think about how many things had to happen for this story to happen. The wall had to collapse. The blizzard had to happen. She had to miss her bus. The rabbi had to kindly take her there. The guy had to show up for Purim. There's so many different details that if one tiny detail would have been different, this couple may have never found one another. But God is the conductor, and He's a master conductor. He's the maestro. And the world is a symphony, a beautiful symphony. And every once in a while, He lets us hear it sound. Do yourself a favor. Try to find the conductor, because if you do, you may have a shot at listening to the symphony. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom until next week.